This is emotion art. Emotion because each of the ways we interact with the world are filtered through our own emotions. And art because we create a lifelong masterpiece from the rich shadows and highlights of those experiences. I tend to be a pretty private person, and sharing stories about myself, either directly or indirectly, is very difficult for me. The idea of being on this podcast taps into a lot of my fears of embarrassment and judgment. So being in the facilitation seat, where I can ask the questions instead of answering them, feels like a good place for me to start. The intention of this recording was to capture a small piece of Michael's story. When people meet him and begin to hear his story, many times the reaction to his rich and varied upbringing is, "You should write a book." But as time wears on and people experience his charisma, passion, and depth of need to have difficult and honest conversation, this leads to the second reaction to his story, often coming in the form of judgment. Is this guy trying to start a cult? In this way, Michael is one of the most misunderstood people I have met. My hope is through the telling of his story, more people get to hear about his incredible journey, how it has impacted him, and how it has shaped and reshaped his worldview. Here's just a tiny bit of Michael's story. Part 1 of Infinity. Hello, Michael.
Hello, Angela.
I have a question. If you don't identify yourself with a label or a name, what do you identify yourself with? Is there an emotion you identify yourself with?
I think maybe curiosity. That's the first thing that jumps out at me. Everything just feels like curiosity. It's more and more.
So if someone said to you, "Hello, curiosity," how would that feel inside of you?
Like I had a full body reaction.
Okay. Great.
I do feel like curiosity.
Welcome to the Forge.
Thank you. The Forge is a lot of fun
Sometimes.
and can be really ouchy.
Sometimes.
We just moved to this property, within the last year. And it has been such a heat up and hammer blow process that it just started being referred to as the Forge. So much emotional trauma as households blend together, and I mean both
And fall apart.
and fall apart. And both you and I have been walking through. I mean, I guess I think of it as an awakening. It feels like I'm awake. It feels like I'm waking up, and it feels like I'm walking next to a person who is waking up. That's just what it feels like to me, and that's a so traumatic process.
Sometimes it feels like waking up from a nightmare. You know, like when you wake up and you feel anxious and sad. And sometimes it feels like waking up from the kinds of dreams that you want to go back to, and wading through all the differences and nuances of all of those things and figuring out which parts you want to remain.
Interesting. That made me feel like in the beginning stages, it felt like waking up from like something that was comfortable. And it's just like you don't want, like it's so uncomfortable to wake up because it's just a dream. That's what you know. But then in the ending phases, it felt like waking up from a nightmare. Because as I became aware that I was in a dream, I became aware that in the dream I wasn't in control. I was just reacting to whatever happened. And so going back to sleep then started to be the thing that felt like what I did not want to do.
Do you feel more in control in the waking?
The more wakefulness I feel, the more control. And it's all just control of myself that takes away my fear of not being in control of everything else, because I'm not, and I never was. But if I know who I am, and if I'm in complete control of how I feel and what I say and what I do, not as reactions, but just purely as what flows out of what I want, who I am, underneath all the persona, then I'm in control.
So sometimes people approach that like being in control of themselves and their actions and their emotions, and it becomes a mask because people are super worried about their perception, and so they control themselves to control perception.
Masking is a pseudo control. It's a type of control.
Yeah. So how does it feel different inside of you, the control you feel of yourself that doesn't include a mask?
Not having a mask makes it so that the energy is producing itself. The actions are producing themselves. They're infinitely replicatable. Every single thing that springs forth from the essential truth of what's inside you in any given moment. Because, I mean, really, we are creatures of emotion. Emotion is where it all comes from. Emotion is where all the work is done. Going inside yourself to bring healing to yourself, the first step is waking up to your emotions. Just realizing that they're there and that they mean something. It's not just you. Just like your thoughts. Your thoughts are not just you. They're your thoughts. Your circulatory system is not you. It's your circulatory system. Your thoughts are not you. They're the software that all the raw data coming in is collected and processed through. That's it. The emotions are the system that figures out what to do with the raw data. The processed data, I should say. There are two different systems. They're designed to do different things. And when I become intimate with my feelings, that's when healing starts. That's when I start getting to know myself. That's what I start finding out. Who am I? What do I even want to say yes to? What do I want to do? And the more I ask that question, the more the answer just becomes obvious because it's already happening. What do I want to do? Oh, it's already happening. Sort of. And this is kind of an exaggerated simplification, but that feels like control. It also feels like surrender. They're both the same thing. Without surrender, there is no control. I spent my life grasping for control because I didn't feel in control. I didn't understand the world. And eventually I found control, but it was only when I stopped looking for control and started practicing surrender, just surrendering.
Yeah, because control has a feeling of like a closed, tight fist, a
Yes.
hard hold.
Yes. That's not the kind of control I'm
And
talking about.
surrender is very the opposite of that.
Open hand.
Yeah.
Yes. Everything is as it should be. Everything that is exactly the way it should be. None of it's going to happen the way I imagine it will, because it never has. And it's going to be incredible.
So that brings up an interesting point that we talk about often, the use of words and their definitions. So for me, when you talk about control, my feeling is that tight hold. I must control. And for you, that word means something very different.
The first one that pops into my head is stoner.
Yeah.
Seeing the difference in how my generation thought of stoner, or I should just say me. I don't know if it was the rest of my generation, but stoner to me has always meant someone that sits on a couch stupid, like without ambition, without thought, without intelligence, just bleh.
Like unproductive.
Couch potato, unproductive. Unproductive, yes.
And a little bit like irresponsible. I think there's irresponsibility in there.
Absolutely. Talking to the kids, it has a connotation of someone who smokes a lot of weed and dresses in, comfortable, colorful, kind of hippie, and talks about existential things. It's almost opposite. And so just to your point, that was the first thing that came to me, because you're right. If that's a lesson that we've been going through the washing machine ringer over and over and over on. When you hear a word and when I hear a word, we're hearing two different words, because the emotion that the word triggers is really the only thing trying to be expressed. And I say a word from an emotion. It triggers an emotion in you. Different worldview, different emotion. Now we're having two different conversations, and neither of us can figure out why the whole world just went crazy.
Yeah, and often when we find ourselves having two different conversations, we're reacting internally to whatever word or idea, the definition inside of us. If we are having an at odds conversation, it's because I'm holding tightly to the definition that I believe, and you're holding, I perceive this, holding tightly to the definition that you believe, but there's not curiosity about whether or not we're actually thinking about the same thing. Maybe I'm speaking for myself.
You are.
Fine. This is supposed to be your intro, not mine.
This is supposed to be exactly what it is. It never turns out the way I imagine, and it's always better.
You just wanted to get me in front of a mic. And a Michael.
I am a mic. So, yeah, you're right.
Okay, so the forge. Here we are.
So the concept of the forge has developed into, like, imagine a sphere of something super precious, and it's got this thick, hard crust around it. And if you take that thing and you stick it in a forge in white hot heat, that outside, that is just common materials, that's the persona, that's the mask, that's the control. That outside will heat up so to the point that it's so hot that it will just crumble away. In another way of looking at it, we have walls to keep us safe. And behind each wall is an emotional trauma. And life is the forge. The friction of being alive will heat those traumas up, because the hammer of the emotions that are always coming to knock you down, the person says the thing that just hits to the core of that wound, and that wound heats up. And when that wound gets hot enough, it's so uncomfortable that the energy being put into maintaining the wall, the persona, the mask to cover up the emotional wound,
Or to feel safe. Maybe
that's
not
what it feels
necessarily
like.
a mask,
It feels like
just a safety.
masks. That's what a mask is for, to keep you safe.
Mm.
But that discomfort is so great that it no longer feels worth putting the energy into that wall. And so you allow the wall to crumble. You stop maintaining it. You stop maintaining the illusion. The wall just crumbles on its own. I can't break any walls down. I see myself as somebody who breaks walls. That's what I do. I break walls down. But I can't actually break the walls down inside myself. I certainly can't break any walls down inside of anybody else. I can't break walls down inside myself, but I can allow the discomfort of the emotional pain to surrender my energy back to where it wants to go. So it's no longer going into maintaining the wall. The wall crumbles. The now white hot beauty of whatever that emotion is, whatever that part of that little boy that was Michael, whatever it is, it's all beauty. And that beauty no longer is hidden. And so it just starts to shine out. And it wasn't scary after all. And that's healing. And that's why the forge has a lot of significance to me. And the thing that brings me the most pleasure that I've ever experienced in my life is seeing behind the walls, the masks, into the raw, unfiltered, unedited emotion that is the human in front of me.
That makes people incredibly uncomfortable.
Incredibly uncomfortable.
And as a result, they say you make them very uncomfortable.
Correct. They have to build a persona to hide them from that discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
That's what all trauma is. All of it. Every piece of trauma that I have ever found inside myself, it was stories. Like the wall itself creates the trauma. You build the wall there thinking that there's trauma, and it is what's creating the trauma, because that person inside wants to be free. So they're banging on the wall. And this is all an imagination. Like, it's different for everybody because it's all emotional, abstract emotional stuff.
Sure, but some people do have real trauma that then they protect themselves from.
Everyone has real trauma.
So what I heard you say is that the wall is the trauma. But I think there's also trauma.
Yes. Victims, like emotional victims, people that have been a victim of somebody else's reactions to their own trauma that come out in an extreme way.
Sure, there's that kind of trauma. There's also micro trauma, traumas that happen a lot over time. I think a lot of children, as they become adults, there might not be like one instance that was clearly the traumatic instance, but like if you had parents that didn't fit, they could have been doing the very best that they could. So they're not trying to inflict any trauma upon you, right? They're not victimizing you in any way. That's not the intention. But if you have parents that don't fit you as an individual and the things that you need or have come to need, or would have been nice.
Yes.
That can inflict like a series of small traumas that then can create kind of a well of discomfort or lack of ability to navigate in a way that maybe as an adult you see it would be more healthy, but there's still that wall around that.
Is there anyone that you know that you don't feel confident have aggregated micro traumas from their upbringing and past? Anyone you can think of?
Wait, maybe I don't
Just a yes or
understand.
no.
Well, yes, I know, but I'm trying to understand your double negative question. So,
Fair.
do I think that every person that I meet has a series of microtraumas?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So that's something, because not everybody has experienced, at least knowingly experienced, major trauma.
Yeah, and sometimes that micro trauma, like we dismiss it even in ourselves because we're like, nothing big really ever happened to me, but I have a series of micro traumas. And for a long time, I discounted those and was like, well, nothing big ever happened. What am I complaining about? Or why do I feel so anxious? Or why do I have an inability to access my own emotions or identify them or whatever? So I would like dismiss that as just like, come on, you should have your shit together by now. Nothing bad happened to you.
The ultimate load we carry. You should have your shit together by now.
Yeah.
It is.
And it's terrifying to realize that you don't, because we have this idea as children that once we become adults, we'll have our shit together.
Yes.
And then we get to adulthood and we're like,
Don't have my shit together.
don't have my shit together. But then there's that ultimate freedom to look back and go, oh, the adults in my life also didn't have their shit together. So maybe there's more compassion and forgiveness and grace there.
And ultimately, the point I came to was to realize that everybody around me does have their shit together. They just don't think they do. They are trapped in so many mental games to try to uphold mask after mask after wall after wall after wall after wall that they are just, it's like that centipede walking along the road, and then the fox says, whoa, that's a lot of legs. How do you know which one to put down first? And the centipede couldn't walk anymore. It just ended up laying in the ditch trying to figure out which foot. It already knew. The only reason it doesn't know now is not because it doesn't know. It's because it has stories in its head that it doesn't know, that it can't figure it out. So all it has to do is find itself again, find that inner wellspring of pure instinctual energy, and boom, it's back on the road.
And in some cases, one might argue that the fox just inflicted a micro trauma on that centipede by asking the question, just a question.
Fox only has 4 legs.
Didn't intend for it to be any kind of negative thought about the centipede, just probably pure curiosity.
Maybe
wow,
awe.
how does that work?
Yes.
But inside the centipede now
Its whole life is derailed.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. So it brings me to a point now. I just don't worry about what people are thinking. Like, that's the ultimate end to surrendering to the energy inside myself, being anything it wants to be, is not worrying about perception. There's a mantra I heard somewhere that, oh, I need to close that door. The small details that we have to learn.
Recording in a house with 10 people.
Oh my gosh. The Forge. It's the most wonderful, terrible, awesome, awfulsome place. It's fantastic. And it's getting more beautiful every day. Sidetrack. So in that pursuit of allowing my walls and my masks to fall in the face of the heat, and then eventually in the face of just, I love watching them fall. I don't need to wait for the heat to make it so that I can't uphold them anymore. I just like to crumble them when I find them, because there's always treasure behind them. Where that's brought me to is I wanted to figure out how to say yes. I wanted to figure out how to do what I wanted to do, to be able to say yes. And so, I mean, eventually I just had to get real intimate with no. Anything that didn't feel like yes, 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 full fuck yes, no. As a child, and I'm talking emotionally, as a child, I had to learn to say no. I had to learn to say no. And once I got real comfortable with it and everyone around me got real uncomfortable with me, I became yes. And there was a day that I remember realizing that I never wanted to say no again. And so I just stopped saying no. Everything is yes to me. And I will physically say the word no sometimes. Rarely do I find myself in a place where I have to say no to somebody. But when I say no to them, the feeling inside me is not closure. It is wide open. Yes. Just not to this. Because I've learned to listen to my energy.
I have a question about that. Knowing what I know of your childhood, which is not a story that you've talked about yet on this podcast.
That's actually what I'm intending to talk about right now.
Yeah.
Well, I'm scared to talk about it, okay?
Okay. Well, I'm scared to be on camera because I haven't taken a shower.
That's why you're not on camera.
I know. Knowing what
Do you
I
want
know.
me to shift it? You want to be on camera?
No, I don't. We'll get it on camera another day.
Great.
Knowing what I know of your childhood, when you just said you had to learn to say no as a child, somewhere in there, everything that I know is you really didn't have the opportunity to say no. You
Correct.
were very locked in. Can you remember a time when you were learning to say no in an environment in which no was not actually acceptable?
Yes.
Okay. I would like to know what that is.
When I was a child, I did not say no. Everybody took that for granted. I was the golden child, and I could do no wrong. And I was a chameleon, and I didn't know how to say no, and I never practiced it. I never learned it. So when I say as a child I had to learn to say no, I mean a child emotionally, not physically, because I didn't learn it when I was a physical child. I was not allowed. I was spanked for saying no, and then shunned for saying no.
And your life was not set up for no in any way. Like there was no autonomy in your life.
Because that core of my unconscious didn't want my life to be set up that way. That's why I made the decisions I made. That's why I left home when I was 11. I never learned how to say no. That's a chaotic place to be in. And I learned how to say no to you, actually. Not just you, to everyone in my life, but that's something that I've learned in the past 2 years is generous, less. It's become a condensed lesson within the past 2 years. It's been there consciously for the past 5 years, but I would say the past 6 months is when I've learned to say no. That's when that child was able to start growing up. And that's when I found yes. That's when yes found me. Everything feels like yes now. Even the things that I don't want to do, like right now, going to work, driving to Portland every day, every weekday to work. No part of me wants to do that. I don't want to be working in flooring. No part of me wants to do that. And now, and I mean now, like in the past weeks and months, it has been evolving from I don't want to do this to yes. Not forever, but yes.
Yeah, I've seen that shift in you quite strikingly.
And now, like, I literally feel excited because it's an adventure. I don't know what it's going to be the first day I've ever gone on that day. I don't know what's going to happen. And I know that I'm just going to be me. And so it's not going to go like I think it will. And it's going to be incredible. So, yes. The point being, the things that my attention get drawn to, I do. The things they don't get drawn to, I don't do. Without apology, without fear of appearances.
How does that manifest, if you have an example?
The problem coming up with an example is that it feels like every single thing that happens in every moment of every day is the example. It's just how I see myself, I guess. So I want to challenge myself. I've done a couple of the Welcome to the Forge podcasts where I interview somebody. And my goal in there is to get to the emotional texture of who they are. What makes this person who they are? And how do they see themselves? And that's the most beautiful thing that I've ever seen because it's art. It all feels like art. It feels like the texture and depths and richness of like an oil, but in an emotional sense. And I want to challenge myself to do the thing that I ask the people I talk to give a 5-minute version of the story of Michael. And I'm afraid to do that because it's so chaotic. It's not cohesive. I can't string it together. I can't make sense of it. So I'm afraid I'll just meander around and peter out and not be able to really remember anything. But in the interest of an emotional texture, I'm going to try. I was born in 1984. Wow. Why did I think I was born in 1984?
That's a lie.
I was born in 1981. That is not a lie. It's literally my memory. I was born in 1981 in Chicago to parents who were very much attracted to the free hippie of the time, of the 70s, in a Jesus way, though. Not like free love and all that stuff, but
not the sex and drugs part.
Not the sex and drugs part so much. but the freedom from living life the way they had been raised to live it. And so then my parents moved to Chicago because God told them to open a coffee shop, and I was born there. And after a couple of months, they left Chicago. I don't know where they went, but they had been interacting with a group that was an offshoot from some of the movements, the 70s Jesus movements, like the big, Shiloh House. And there's a few names that, my dad always threw around. But this was a guy named Jim Roberts, came out of that whole thing, and he had just an intense amount of charisma. And he was trying to live back in the Bible times, to just everything be absolutely literal. And it was an extremist thing, trying to break free from the demons, from the chains. But he was very captivating, and a lot of people followed him, and he was willing to let them follow. And it was a very secretive group, but my parents got involved. And I think when I was about 2 is when they joined that group and became part of it. And this was a group that they're still around today. The leader, Jim Roberts, died, but they're not known for like sexual type scandal, Kool-Aid type stuff, but they're very much a cult in the negative click sense of the word, in that they followed Jim Roberts for a long time, and people who joined would sell everything they had, cut all ties with their families, burn their Social Security cards, to renounce this world. It's all just very literal. Diane Sawyer did a little feature on it on primetime. I've Googled it before and found it, Diane Sawyer and the Brethren, I think. You just get to see a little glimpse of whatever from
mass media standpoint.
From their perspective, sure. We traveled with that group. I don't really have specific memories from that time, but my dad got more and more uncomfortable with it, and finally he got side work, because you're not supposed to work. You just travel around wherever Jim Roberts and the older brothers tell you to go, and you be in the cities and you just preach about Christ, and you try to convert people, and you check dumpsters. We ate out of dumpsters, and all the little activities that they developed to maintain their culture within a bigger culture. Living outside of town in the woods, outside of golf courses, finding empty houses to look up and find out who owns them, and be like, hey, we're just this humble traveling group of people who love Jesus, and we noticed your empty house, and we want to offer to take care of it and protect it from vandalism. And eventually somebody would say yes, and sometimes they were great relationships, sometimes they'd end poorly, but then you move into this house and there's 30 people there. It's just an intensely different culture that had to be there to maintain anonymity and slide under all the rules that are supposed to keep everybody a platonic family, and the way the culture wants us.
Like the rule about you going to school and things like that.
Yes.
Truancy law and all that.
Oh my gosh, yes. Yeah, I spent my life hiding from that, at least during the school years. So then my dad finally realized that he was going to get kicked out because he wasn't a good fit. My mom was fully there. So he orchestrated this whole thing, and he basically kidnapped us.
Well, he gave you a choice.
Whatever choice, a 5, 7, 9, it's just, yeah, sure. He gave us a choice, but that's beside the point.
Sure.
He kidnapped us from this cult. And it's a very interesting story how he did it. Basically, like, we saw less and less of him. They were always sending him traveling far distant places for months at a time. And then we'd see him for like one day, one night or something. And then he was like, had this sense that it was going to be the last time he saw us. And he had just gotten this dispensation from Jim Roberts that he could spend this one night with us as we crossed paths. And so he was just like, hey, I just really want to take him for a walk, and we'll start heading back from our walk at noon. And so he took us for a walk, and the walk took us past a Greyhound bus station, and he went past the Greyhound bus station so that he could start heading back at noon, because honesty has always been a kryptonite for my dad. And we just never made it back. We stopped at the bus station, but a block away from the house, he stopped us all, and he was just like, this is what's happening. I don't want to make the choice for you guys. He was sincere, but as a kid on that city street with no interface with real life outside of this group, I think I have a flash memory of that, just an emotional snapshot of like the street. That was in Denver, and went to Portland, and he worked multiple jobs, painting and doing all kinds of stuff. And we were living on a neutral block between a Crips territory and a Bloods territory. And it was just like all these little kids fresh out of this completely secluded, sheltered existence, going to this, and he found a Christian school for us. But I mean, you can imagine in a city like that, it was just no sense of how to process what's going on. And
How old were you when you left with your dad?
I was, I they joined when I was 2. I'm just stating facts that I think I remember from hearing, and it was like 5.5 years. So I would have been 7-ish. Isaac, my younger brother, would have been 5. Mariah would have been 9, and Jessica would have been 12. He believed that my mom would follow. He just believed it, and she didn't. I can't even imagine what it was like to go through losing all your children at that age, and knowing that if you followed them, your eternal soul was forfeit.
That's terrifying.
Oh. And I mean, that's been her road to walk through, and she's back in our life, and she's back in my life. It's wonderful. And there's the trauma to walk through from all of that. Mm-hmm. And I just appreciate that I get to show up in the moments when I can. Sidetrack.
Not a sidetrack.
Well, it's a sidetrack to the present. I'm trying to stay in the plane of existence that doesn't exist for me, the past. So
after you left with your dad?
Yeah, we lived in Portland for a little while, then moved to Coquille. My dad, another woman that had been in the group left, and my dad and her ended up getting married, Teresa. And she was a great mom. She stepped in the best she could, and she didn't know what she was doing. But boy, she did it with all her heart. And I'm thankful. And it's kind of like I have 2 moms in a weird way, 2 and none at the same time. Because I didn't really grow up with either of them. Because after we moved to Coquille, then eventually when I was 11, well, back up a couple of years, Mariah went back to join the group when she was 11. So she was only out for 2 years. Then she went back because she missed my mom. And she was there for 4 years. So then when I was 11, I was like, I want to go travel with my mom and have all this adventure because I'm already, at that time, I'm already starting to search, starting to look, starting to feel my walls. And I've obviously had no idea what any of it was, but looking back, it's like, oh yes, I'm looking for something. I'm not finding it where I am, so I've got to go looking. So when I was 11, I saw Mariah for one night as we traded places. She went to live with Dad. I went to live with Mom. Was there till I was 15. Traveled around. I have a lot more memories from that time, but still, it's foggy. And a coming of age little chameleon that doesn't like boundaries. Whew, that's a messy story. Yeah, that's a chaotic time. And, you know, there was times I had all the ways that I could kill myself organized by how uncomfortable I thought it would be and stuff. And like put needles in myself and just do things to just, I don't know why. Maybe because I felt like I needed to pay for all my sins that I was constantly doing because I could never be the person that I thought I was supposed to be. And because I didn't want to burn in hell for masturbating. I don't know. I would write down all the horrible, horrible things that I would do and think on a piece of paper and burn it. And I would try anything. I'd pick up a pill off a park bench and swallow it. Like, I have memories of doing that kind of thing. Like, I was looking, anything. I was lost, so lost. And that Goo Goo Dolls song, Name, that was my theme because I was only allowed to read the Bible in the Jim Roberts group. There were no other books I was allowed to read. Wasn't allowed to listen to music. So from 11 to 15, I got to know the Bible really well. There was one guy that would take me with him, and he did a bunch of scientific research to disprove evolution. And he was pretty lenient with me, and he knew I was reading other books in the library. But I found the Diary of Anne Frank, and that was just like the emotional connection. It felt like love and fantasy and darkness and like the emotions swirling inside. What was the draw? It's because I was just reading about myself. Looking back.
A child locked in.
Completely. No clue what's going on in the world around them. Can't look out. Not in control because the energy can't decide. My energy can't decide. So where was I?
You were back in the group from 11 to 15.
Oh, yeah.
With a lot of self-destructive behavior.
Yes. And I played a lot of guitar. That kind of it really helped me out. And I had a lot of really weird experiences that looking back, it's just like I should be a statistic of everything that happens to kids because I was living in the inner city, traveling. Like I never stayed anywhere more than a couple of months, usually a few
Highly
weeks.
influenced, like highly, like
Always,
easily gullible, and
all
yeah.
extremely that chameleon aspect of mine. My colors immediately start changing shade as I look at somebody. It's just who I've always been. And hanging out downtown, witnessing, we called it, witnessing to the gutter punks and the college kids and the just anyone. You go where the Holy Spirit leads you, and if the Holy Spirit tells you to talk to someone, you talk to somebody. And coming full circle.
Don't get too ahead of yourself yet.
Oh, okay, yeah, no kidding.
It gets confusing.
That whole concept gives me chills in how I understand it now. But so when I was 15, we were witnessing outside a Fish concert in Seattle, and someone gave me mushrooms, and I ate them. And I think basically I felt like I'm going to die. If I keep on doing this inner city stuff as myself, I'm going to die. So I told the brothers, I got to go. And they were like, well, if you go back to be with your dad, then you're no longer welcome here. You can't play with our toys. And they were like, but your sister Mariah is living in Tennessee with an Amish community. Go stay with her. And they sent a couple of brothers, and my mom went with me. And I did that for 4 years. I mean, I joined the church, and I knew how to speak Pennsylvania Dutch. And I've spent 4 years farming behind, horses, horse-drawn equipment, horse and buggies, churn a lot of butter, all that good stuff. So many good memories. But then I wanted to go to India with my dad's missionary organization to work at the orphanage and teach school. So I went to India for 9 months, did construction and stuff. Then I moved to Corvallis and got married, started having kids, and finally felt like there was some home, there was some structure, and like I was sinking my roots in. And then life going along, going to church, raising up good kids, spanking them, I am going to do this right. Climbing in a career, making more money, and then, oh, you got to go.
I gotta go.
That's okay. I really appreciate your help to help me focus through this. Thank you.
I tried to change my massage time, but that doesn't work.
No. I like things to be the way they are.
I need to get ready to go.
I'm gonna finish up here, and just because I wanna finish thinking through this trajectory.
I know, but it's helpful to discourse.
You
sometime.
have been incredibly helpful, as you are in everything I do. Thank you. But I could never shake the feeling that there's something wrong, that it just didn't fit. None of it fit together. And I would always talk to anyone who would talk to me, to Jehovah's Witness, Mormons. And eventually I realized that the entire framework that I had for the world didn't actually make sense. I had been spending my life trying to convince myself it made sense. And so I had logical arguments that helped it make sense. But the truth is, deep down inside, in my emotions, it didn't make sense. So then I started breaking it all down and just started facing the fear that I'm going to go to hell, the fear that I'm a bad dad, a bad partner, a bad everything, and just saying no to everything and going through my breaking. And yeah. And now what? I don't know. I want to work with Spencer. Zeal Cultivations. Just want to cultivate zeal in the world. Build up this beautiful property. Have any conversations that come across my way. It's all welcome to the Forge. And there really is no conclusion.